No mai haere mai, and welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about coercion, control, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the Centrepoint community, a notorious cult in New Zealand, and now I run a website that advocates for the former children of the community.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I run the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, and I'm privileged to walk alongside people after leaving this group as they embark on their new lives.
And I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a new initiative in Aotearoa to support leavers of high-demand religious groups.
Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook. We'll be talking to experts and leavers of coercively controlling groups, and we will call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Come with us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Cult Chat. I'm so delighted to be here today with Natalie Malcon and Rosanna Overcomer. I'm sure most of the country has probably watched the Escaping Utopia series that has come out across the screens on TVNZ recently, and Natalie is the producer of that. We're going to be talking with her about some of the production elements and working with sensitive material and people who are sharing their stories. And I'm delighted to have Rosanna Overcomer here with us today. Rosanna was one of 7 former members of Gloriavale who shared their stories on this documentary. And we're going to just be discussing some of the unusual elements that may not usually pop up in a podcast or in a TV interview or a newspaper article around what it's like to participate in a documentary series that spans numbers of months and the impact it has on you, knowing your story is going to be coming to the limelight. And we'll be asking some interesting questions about Natalie, like what didn't make it into the documentary, and if you had an opportunity to make 5 more documentaries, where would the storyline go? Could there have been other stories that were told about Gloriavale? We're just delighted to have you.
Thanks, Liz. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Liz.
And that was a big, long introduction. And I am Liz Gregory, and I am hosting these two here today on the podcast. I guess let's start with you, Natalie, because a production like this doesn't just land on the screens of New Zealand TV. There's obviously a process here. Can you just walk us back? How many years ago did this idea get implanted in your head, and how did it get there, and who put the idea there?
Wow. So as you know, Liz, you and I have been talking for, it must be about 3 years ago that I first rang you about this. I was working on another documentary about another cult in New Zealand, another infamous cult called Centrepoint. And whilst I was making that documentary, I was having lots of conversations with, former Centrepoint members, and it was the driving factor for a lot of those people speaking out in that documentary, because they were so concerned about what was happening in Gloriavale. And, hearing those stories of the former children of Centrepoint really sort of drove me to want to tell the Gloriavale story, just when I found out there was 350 children still living in Gloriavale. So, the process for getting something off the ground of this scale in New Zealand is not a simple one. I think we got turned down a couple of times for funding, and we persevered with it. And we finally managed to get funding. I think it was beginning of 2022.
That sounds right. Now you're working with Warner Brothers New Zealand, and so you're talking about an acclaimed company in many ways, and yet you're pitching a story and it's still being turned down for funding. How did that feel when you knew that there had been funding given for what we call the glossy Gloriavale documentaries back in 2014, 15, 16?
We were gutted. We were absolutely gutted, and I remember having to let you know, Liz, that we'd been turned down because we were pretty sure we were going to get it because the Centrepoint documentary was so successful. But as we know, in New Zealand, it's really hard to get funding to make anything. We were absolutely gutted that first time, but we were absolutely determined that we were going to tell this story because we'd already started talking to people, and we knew there was a huge story here that needed to be told, and it needed to be told well.
I agree. I loved your motivation, and it was through the Centrepoint story and my link there with Anka Richter and yourself. She was involved with the Centrepoint documentary as well, and that's how we came to connect with you, Natalie, and our team. And I was able to talk to people who were participated in the Centrepoint story, and I asked them about you and the production team and whether you were a safe producer for people who had experienced trauma from a cult. And I felt very confident from their responses. They were very happy with the way you had depicted their stories. And I remember really early on, Rosanna is one of the first people that I rang and talked to about this possible opportunity. Rosanna, let's bring you in here. What do you remember of those early conversations and thinking whether was this something you wanted to get involved in?
Yes, I remember clearly. I'd had some not so great experiences with other media, and so actually initially I wasn't interested, but it was just from those other earlier experiences, and I didn't trust any media or reporters at that point. But in talking to Natalie and seeing her motivation and realizing that this could be something that helped with my purpose of being a voice for the children still there and hopefully making a significant change in their lives, that's why I agreed to come on and be part of it. Yeah.
I just want to add here, I had seen a clip of Rosie somewhere. I think it was a newspaper interview or something, but they had a little video clip of Rosie, and I just thought, as soon as I saw her and heard her, I thought, I really want her. But I really I don't like to try and talk people into telling their stories if they're not ready to tell them. So, I think Rosie and I had a couple of phone calls, and then she didn't call me back. And I thought, oh, she's not going to do it. She's not going to do it. And then finally she did call me back and she said yes. And I was so excited because I knew that she had an incredible story, and I knew that she was going to be able to tell it really well, just from that little clip I'd seen.
So amazing. And I think Rosie's just referring to, and probably more in the earlier years, Rosie, was it fair to say the New Zealand media were quite unaware of the impact of talking to media, the cult sphere, the sensitivities around the topics that can come out on a news splash, that you might spend an hour with someone and you get a 2-minute soundbite on the 6 o'clock news and you poured your story out and it hasn't come together. Would that be a fair?
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And just seeing things that I said almost taken out of context just for that wee soundbite, and then feeling like, I let these people into my home and my heart, and I've wasted their energy. And really, I care about the people in Gloriavale. Right. And so I want that to come across in anything I say and do. And people will read things however they want, but I want it always to be clear what my motives are. And when I felt like that wasn't coming across, I just wasn't interested until, I had some great chats with Natalie, and it was really clear what her motive and purpose was. Yeah.
I love that. And I have to say, I've found the New Zealand media have really been willing to listen to the feedback that we've given them about how to tell a good story. And that's something I'm really disappointed about, is the potential demise of long-form doco programs like Your Sunday and Your Current Affairs, because stories like that of cult survivors, they don't they deserve more than a 1 and 2 minute soundbite on news. There's a deeper story there, and we have to have this long form journalism where people pour months into understanding, their topic. And so, Natalie, I think the timing of this one was incredible. How many months were the cameras on the ground?
I think we began filming midway through 2022, and I think our last shoot was right at the end of 2023.
Cool.
So, yeah.
They were busy years. There was a lot going on. I want to ask you, how do you've got, what, 7 main sort of cast who are from Gloriavale, and then there are other supporting casts like Marcus and myself. How do you create a story? Like, what goes on in this production mode? You must have a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor.
There's a lot on the cutting room floor. This was an incredibly complex story. So we got funding for 3 standalone 1 hours, as a series, and we divided it up. We decided that the first episode was we were going to delve into the history and the origin story. The middle episode was really about what it was like to grow up and be born into Gloriavale, and sort of the beginnings of what it's like to leave. And then the final episode was very much contemporary, what's happening now. But yes, there's a huge process that goes on. I mean, obviously you've got the filming, but the editing is, that's a huge part of the storytelling, and there is a lot on the cutting room floor on this one because we just couldn't fit everything we wanted to into 3 episodes. There's a lot of fights that go on in the edit suite.
Wow.
Let me tell you. Yes, so in our editing team, we had 2 incredible editors who are actually partners in real life, Tori and Carl, who I think you've both met, and my co-director Justin.
Yes.
And 4 of us, let's just say, we didn't always agree. So, sometimes we did have some very heated debates about what to include and what to not to include, and you just actually you can't include everything in this story. It's 50 years, and so many characters and so many layers and so many themes. We had our sort of 7 main characters. We couldn't tell their whole story either. So the hardest thing to cut, I think, was we actually did an incredible interview with Pearl's husband, Paul.
Yes.
He was amazing, and his storytelling skills were incredible, and he was so insightful and compelling. And at the end of the day, we had to make a really difficult call not to include his interview because we checked the duration. So yes, that was one of the hardest things.
Wow, part 4, 5, 6 coming up.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's it. I mean, it's still unfolding, isn't it? It's a story that has no ending. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah. Rosie, how did you feel about your story and the general themes that were portrayed? Did you feel the balance was struck?
I did. I felt like it was a great balance too. Obviously, I was born in there, so the first episode, I had heard a lot of what went on. I knew bits and pieces, but that part wasn't so much my own story. And then the second and third episode, I felt like they did such a great job of, obviously there was things missing from my story that can't be in there, but they had got, I felt like my heart came across in it and who I am so well. I felt like there was no misrepresentation of who I am and my story, so that I really appreciated that. Yeah,
I think one of the things that people have found the most surprising about the documentary, the feedback that I've had, is that in the middle of it all, there is this beautiful love story, and that's Rosanna and Elijah's love story. People were not expecting that. So, you know, I love that, and it was always really, really important that this wasn't just a dark and bleak story. We wanted to have inspirational stories, because the people we were talking to are all so inspirational, and I hope the feeling of hope as well. That was another thing that we really wanted to get across strongly, was that there is hope after Gloriavale. People can leave, and they can go on to lead, really happy and fruitful lives on the outside.
You know, your whole storyline, at the end of the day, it really did tip people over the edge, the New Zealand public. You've got those stories of hope, but actually that third episode, I've never seen an outpouring like it. The hundreds of messages, the emails, the phone calls. Just recently at the Fairly AMP show, we had a stall and people were coming past, and I just can't tell you the numbers of people who wept and were teary, the men who emailed saying they were weeping. Something happened in New Zealand. Rosie, what have you found as far as feedback has been like?
99% great feedback. People have been, I feel like, really touched, and probably the biggest thing I've noticed is that they get it. The New Zealand public gets the psychological control now, which I think for a long time in general they haven't. And they can say things like, oh, what is that weird place? Shut it down, that knee-jerk reaction, whereas now they get that these people actually believe the system that they're living in, and it's not just this easy, fix. It's a very complicated situation, and that we're dealing with real people, real lives, real children in real time. And that, I think, is, it really blesses me and feels like it's been worth putting myself out there, because there is that risk, and I didn't go into it naively either. And I thought, there is the chance that I am part of this documentary and the only feedback I get is bad, and the only repercussions I get is that my whole family cuts me off.
Yeah.
But that hasn't been the case. It has in some wee instances, but not in general. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Every time a leaver stands up and talks, there is a cost. There's that risk of family alienation from those who are in, those who have left, the re-traumatization of telling your story. There is a cost to speaking up publicly. No one does it lightly. Can you talk about how you felt like the production team sort of assisted with that? Because asking you to retell a story can be difficult. Were there support networks there in place?
Yeah. The production team has been amazing, and that word doesn't even do them justice. Natalie, the whole way along, has supported us, made sure we're okay through our interviews, been happy to stop and start, had a person on call for counselling, and had that person checking in with us. The crew has been amazing, and so just careful and sensitive to the topics. And I never felt judged or laughed at or like it not made light of the seriousness of the situation. And yeah, instead I felt very supported. And even like the cameraman, Jacob, he was just incredible. And the job he's done with the filming is incredible, but how he was in our homes and with us as people was remarkable as well, and how he treated us. So yeah, they have been really sensitive and caring throughout the whole process.
Yeah, I agree. I think I looked at how are you going to film this? Like how can we find leavers that are going to be willing, or even current members, to talk to a camera crew and build trust with them over a short period of time? And how are they going to be able to tell the story and everybody's going to be happy? I mean, these are... Natalie, were you worried about this?
Oh my goodness, you're always worried. Going back to the funding, I knew that once we got the funding to make this, that it would be very unlikely that anybody else would get funding to tell this story for a very long time.
Wow.
So was a real responsibility that this had to be really good. It had to, we had to take a big swing. It had to be worth these amazing people putting themselves on the line, and sharing their story with the nation. So yes, absolutely.
Incredible. Yeah, I think one of our motivations in getting behind it as a trust and supporting the production was, it always was in the back of my head, someone from Gloriavale is going to be watching this. And so, every time I'm sort of speaking, I'm thinking you've got to tell the truth, but you still just got to do it in a really respectful manner, because someone in there is going to watch this, and all you want and hope is that the penny will drop. And you know what? It has dropped. I know the penny has dropped for some people. And for me, that's like those chains that get cut, that you can't put a price tag on that. And yeah, a really long process and a long wait from finding out it was finished and then waiting to see where it was going to air. You must have been delighted with TV1 primetime 3 nights in a row. I mean, can you do any better than that?
Oh, we were absolutely thrilled. We always, that was always what we wanted for this. I mean, there's no other way that we could have engaged the nation.
No.
And we engaged the nation. I mean, it was not only trending on social media, and being talked about on all the networks, it was also being debated in Parliament. So,
and the hairdresser. You know, the power of the conversation with the hairdresser. I just had a message from, was it Marcus Tuck? He's standing in a queue at customs to go overseas. People are in the queue at customs talking about it. Everywhere the conversations are happening, and the thing is keeping the conversations alive, because I know that even though some people might feel like the conversation around Gloriavale is always just around sexual impropriety, which we're not ever going to diminish, because you're never going to get to the bottom of that, but actually there's this big overarching story about psychological abuse, about spiritual abuse, about how people's faith is turned against them. And it's those the entrapment, the enslavement, it's that actually has set the scene for all the other kind of abuse that's followed for 50 years. And you captured it so well. And I want to read to you a couple of quotes from leavers. So we had quite a lot of people here over Easter, people who've come and left Gloriavale as well, and they were conversations just flipping left and right across the lunch table. And I said, do you mind if I just capture this on camera? And I just zoomed, and people were just popping up with their comments. And here's some from some of the leavers. John Reddy said, they're nailing it so well. I just don't know how they would have conveyed to the actors how they got it so well. I don't know how they showed them. It was unnerving, actually. The accuracy of it was mind-blowing. He spoke of a portion where he wasn't even sure whether that was a reenactment or whether that was real, whether that girl was actually a Gloriavale girl that's grown up since he's left, or whether they were actors. So I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. He said, I thought they did a really good job on conveying the SS meeting. Now that's the servants and shepherds meeting. And what's going on inside the person internally. Even though externally, he says, all the meetings may have not happened like that, it actually conveys the high pressure. A lot is coming at you, walking through a minefield. You say one thing and someone's going to jump down your throat. It felt way too real. And he said, and it's amazing how many leavers I've talked to that have had the exact same thoughts about the exact same scenes. It's uncanny how it provoked the same response in leavers, and they articulated it in the same way. He said, that's crazy. And then we had Virginia saying, I'm so impressed how they got into the psyche of how people felt. She said how threatened they feel, how hopeless, how overwhelmed. You know, you can feel completely overwhelmed even though you're surrounded by 600 people. Incredible. She said the details were amazing. The names on the cutlery containers, the coloured tape. Then we had John's wife saying it was all so authentic. The painted backdrops, the blue curtains, the white plastic spread containers with the vitamin tablets. So where do we start? Can we start with the practical stuff? The cutlery containers. the setting of the table. Rosie, what did you think when you saw those opening scenes of the kitchen?
I was the same. I was very impressed, and there were people that I was like, they could have actually been people in Gloriavale. Like that looks like so and so. And like the thick toast, I said to Natalie, "You've got thick toast." um, and there was so much like that I was just like, oh, I was very impressed. There was one little scene, and I'll tell you this story because Pearl, Theo, and I watched the first episode together, and the scene of me in the laundry, and I'm wearing an apron. And the apron wasn't quite right for the laundry, but that's a minor detail. And it was literally the only thing. And then Pearl says, there's one more thing. You should be working much faster because you were always going 100 miles an hour.
Natalie, how did you set up those scenes? Like, what's the process of finding, how did you find actors in New Zealand? How did you recreate the Gloriavale kitchen? Where were you? How long did this take?
Oh my goodness. So we edited the documentary first.
Okay.
And had gaps to film the dramatizations. We had an incredible team who were, they're all at the top of their game. We had, amazing set designer and casting agent, an incredible very experienced drama director called Britta Hawkins, who helmed the drama segments. And, these are people who are at the top of their game, so they researched thoroughly. They knew the Gloriavale even more than I did in lots of ways. Like, they had trawled through everything they could see online so that they could get those details. Like, that's what these people do for a job. So yeah, so they had actually, the set designer said that he went to a shop in Auckland to get the curtain fabric, the blue, and we've got the scene of the young Rosanna looking through the curtain.
Yeah.
And they said that they actually had sold that material to Gloriavale.
Wow.
So it was actually the same material.
Oh my gosh.
That's so cool.
They hand painted the mural, and so they'd looked through all of those, the glossy docos that you speak of. They were very helpful resource.
Right. Interesting. No, yeah, Rosanna, what were you thinking about, like, the actors? Like, where do you find these people from? Or
Yeah, well, I remember when Natalie was talking to us about them casting actors for us, and I was like, can I see them? But she was great and sent photos of a few of the people, and I remember getting the photo of little me and thinking, man, she looks like she could be one of our family, like Pearl's or Joy's or my girl. Like, she definitely looked like one of the family. And then I actually had a couple FaceTimes with the girl who acted a bit older than me. A bit older me, and she just asked me lots of things about even how I tied my belt and what was important to me and how I dressed. And she was lovely. It was great to actually chat to her and, I don't know, feel like I'd met her.
That's so cool.
One day I do.
There were 3 Rosannas. We had 3 different ages for Rosanna. It got quite confusing. It was like, which Rosanna is in this scene?
Yeah. Wow. Look, I just found that level of detail. That's phenomenal. I'm so impressed.
Can I just say that they all, like, everybody on that set just took this so seriously. They, they really took the responsibility of telling real people's stories, and they never forgot that. It was really, really important to us that the story was told with respect, and everybody in that crew just absolutely poured their hearts and souls into telling your story, Rosanna, and Theo's, and everybody else's.
Gosh, so respect that. And I just love the way it's just felt like such a collaborative movie. Everyone who participated got to sign off and say that's true representation of what I felt and experienced. So Yeah.
And can I just also say that I've been getting messages from anybody who's had any involvement in the making, even if it's just a small part, saying how honoured and privileged they are that they've been part of it. So yeah, it's a special project. They don't come along very often, and yeah, I just hope that it is going to have the effect we hope long term.
Same. I could not believe the reenactments, and some of them so real that like I started crying because it felt like I was back in there. It was too real. Yeah, you feel like you're back in there with how well you've done it.
So yeah, let's just look at that retraumaing concept. You're talking about a wave of emotion because you feel like you're back in your past. Did you find generally it a very difficult watch, or having watched it previously prior to it being, released on TV, you had that opportunity to scrutinise it and make suggestions?
I mean, yes, obviously we had watched it earlier and we'd talked through, and we watched it in a great environment too, where we could stop and start it, and Natalie and Philippa were great to watch it with. So I felt like I knew what was in there, but at the same time, so I've actually only watched the first episode again along with the rest of New Zealand. I haven't quite plucked up the courage to watch episode 2 and 3 again. And yeah, it's knowing that it's coming and knowing that they've depicted it so well is both encouraging, because you know that the public is understanding it as it is, but also you have to prepare your mind to take that on and to know this is just a memory, this is just a trigger, but I'm not back in there, and just having a bit of that background going on.
Yeah, self-awareness, self-care. I respect that immensely. Same thing. We had leavers saying, I'm not ready to watch it yet, but I will create a safe time, because the impact on my family after watching it, they will be the ones. I will be a write-off. My husband and I will be a write-off. And so I really respect people who recognise their emotions and know when there's just too much to handle. And let's talk about the fact that everyone who participated in this documentary had an opportunity to watch it with their significant other as well, as for support. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to have that previewing, because these are very sensitive stories. This story had to be right, and it had to be defensible, because what's Gloriavale's biggest line, Rosanna? Oh, that's a bunch of
lies. Yeah, and you're all bitter.
And yet, wasn't it wonderful? I heard people were texting family members saying, you've come across so well. There's no hint of bitterness in that. So, the defensible things, because yes, we've heard from inside Gloriavale. Yeah, there's lots of people saying there's lots of lies. But guess what? They're actually doing something that I've never seen the body of Gloriavale do before, Rosie, and you might agree. They're actually reaching out to people saying, was it true? And then they're getting an answer from maybe inside Gloriavale, it's a bunch of lies. But then they're going to other people inside Gloriavale saying, is that true? They're not actually accepting the first answer they've been given. I find that powerful. Rosie, what's your feeling on the vibe inside Gloriavale? People asking.
I think, I would agree with you that there has been a lot more people just asking the questions. And I think it takes time for them to process this, because, and these questions are some of the questions that ultimately led us to leaving.
Right.
And having the courage and to ask the question, and then to have a place where you can ask it and discuss it that's safe, and that has people coming back and saying, yes, it was true, or maybe I don't know, but let's go and ask somebody else, is all important steps of the process to them understanding what they are actually living in and what they have grown up in. So it will still take time, but them asking the questions is the first right step.
Just on that note, there's one memorable line for me that I always think about is when you were looking at we're trying to find the India community on the map with Elijah, and then talking about sort of, the plan to go there. And Elijah said, you may not see the impact of it when you're there, but 10 years time from now, you might be able to track it back to that point in time, and that might be the point in time that changed the life of one of those children.
I love that line too. That really hit me. And I think about all the work that leavers do to speak up. I can assure you, they're not doing it for themselves. People who have suffered deprivation, trauma, neglect, abuse, everything that happens in there, you don't come out and naturally want to speak up and shout from the rooftops. It doesn't gain you enough peace of mind to have that as the thing you're going to do. But when you have a motivation like love and compassion for family and friends that you believe are entrapped in a system, a wrong system, then boy, you pluck up courage. And didn't they pluck up courage?
Amazing. I think when we first started talking, and I think with you also, Rosanna, both of you said it would be very unlikely that anybody who was a current member of Gloriavale would ever talk to us. And Liz, you were very firm on that. You said it's just not going to happen. All the journalists want that.
I've had years of fielding, hey, we've got a camera, you let us know when someone's leaving next and we'll have a camera there. And I'm firstly thinking I would never impose on someone who's leaving to even ask them to have a camera. Like, that's just a complete overstep. I mean, it just never made sense. But I just remember the day when Boaz said, I'm your guy. And I looked at him and I said, Boaz, you do realise what this looks like. He's like, I'll do it. You just have a think about that. Have a ponder. And boy, he did do it. And of course, you can't get the day they actually leave. Again, that would be badly managed and rude.
We were there next. Well, we had to scramble. It was he had to leave like over New Year's.
Thanks, Boaz. We were on holiday in Nelson. We get this phone call. It's happening. Okay, we all just drop what we're doing, leave our tents up, disappear off to the coast because the cameras are on the ground, get the furniture. I mean, it's just.
It was So we were there the next morning, and Boaz was just incredible. I remember the first night I met Boaz was the first time I ever went down to the Hauperi area, and my researcher and I drove down. I think it was about 10 o'clock at night, and he snuck out of Gloriavale to meet us at Marcus's house, and I think we talked till well after midnight. And we just absolutely fell in love with Boaz. He was like the boy next door, and there's just something so utterly lovable and charming about him. It just broke my heart to hear his story. And I'm just so proud of him. So proud that he, he's out and he's flourishing in the outside world now.
And he let his wife out. These are their stories, and I think that genuinely just comes through, and it obviously resonated with the viewers, because honestly the feedback is more than overwhelming. I'm wondering let's touch on the India story. Clearly there's a decision made when you're doing a doco, Natalie, where you take your cameras and how you make use of your cameras. And sometimes it's appropriate to have your camera out and up front and people know they're being recorded. How difficult is it to make a decision that you're going to go in a sort of secret recording fashion?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I think that was, 9 months into production that we finally made that decision that we were going to India. It was the untold story, and we realised that we had one shot at it, and we had to make it work. We knew that was the only way to do it. There was no way that we were going to get permission to film in there, it was very brave of Rosie and Theo, but Mel Reid has got some incredible scenes, and one of hers, when she talks about going undercover into Gloriavale back in the 90s, was insincerity for the sake of truth. And so that was sort of foremost in our minds when we were planning India, because we knew that what we were doing was potentially going to be controversial, but we were all desperate to help those women and children. And that was something that really came out really strongly for us, is that even people from Gloriavale who had left Gloriavale, India was sort of the forgotten story for them. Even they'd forgotten those women. And I think even Elijah, Rosanna said, in his head, he'd always just thought that they were the most devout, and he hadn't really put his head to it. It sort of took us prompting and asking the questions for it to sort of rattle around in his brain and go, oh, actually, something does need to be done about this. And, we do need to put some thought into what is the best sort of plan of action. And I think that was the only way we could do it. We needed to shock New Zealand into action.
Well, I think it's worked.
Yeah.
It definitely has worked. And again, there's going to be consequences. There's going to be people who disagree that was the best way. But as Natalie said, it was kind of the one chance.
Yeah.
And we had to do it. And I had lots of questions. And, we had lawyers check through the process and second opinions. And I can remember asking Natalie even the day before, can we check it again? Are we going to be okay? And because I don't know how to say this any other way, but I like to be a good person, and I don't like annoying people. I am a people pleaser. And so for me to do something like that felt confrontational, and like that I was potentially going to annoy a lot of people. It was really hard for me, but I could see the bigger picture, and the purpose in it was to hopefully make some significant difference in those girls and their children's lives. And again, it just came down to motivation for me, and then being there to support Theo, who really, really needed to go and check on her sister. Yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible.
For me, the reason why it was so important to tell that story, and why it was so important to tell it now, is that the oldest children in that community are teenagers now. And if something is not done now, there's going to be another generation born into that community. And once we get to that next generation, I just don't think it's solvable. At the moment, those children have New Zealand-born mothers, and that gives them some rights. But next generation are not going to have any rights. So it's incredibly complex. And, I think there's some very intelligent and qualified people who are putting their big, amazing brains to it right now. Which is great. That's what we wanted. That's the result we wanted. But yes, it was. We felt it was imperative to get that story out there. It had to come out, and it had to come out now, or it really would have another Gloriavale of 650 people over there.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's a no-brainer in that way.
We could have made a feature film behind the scenes in India, couldn't we, Rosie?
I bet. Yes, yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, how long were you actually over in India? How many times did you visit the community?
Were we over there 10 days, Natalie?
10 days, yeah.
Yeah. And then we went into the community twice. So, and we spent a long time there both days. And then we actually, I spent quite a bit of time with Faithful and Serena and some of their kids in town the next day. So we spent, a significant amount of time with them, but in saying that, it didn't feel like long enough by any means. No. Yeah.
I found it incredible that you were, it seemed like quite warmly received.
I think maybe there's probably a few elements to that, and one was that they were just so surprised to see us. And would have never entered their head that we'd just rock up to India, you know.
No, I mean, I understand that people within the Gloriavale community do go and visit occasionally. I think over COVID, that obviously was restricted. So I don't think they'd had a lot of visitors over the last, 3 or 4 years.
How different was that, Rosie, going with the external lens, having left Gloriavale, being able to see it for what it is, to then go into India, knowing what the original intention was of India and the mission they had and the hype and the 100,000 or 50,000 a month that India was receiving from Gloriavale, New Zealand, to get this flourishing community up and going. How did it feel when you saw what you saw?
I could probably write a book on those few days. There was a lot that went through my mind. But first walking in there, my initial reaction was, this is exactly as it was 14 years ago. And then the next thought was, this is like a mini Gloriavale. Just seeing the kids out in the garden, the boys in the gardens, the girls hanging out the washing. So there was a bit of that, like, oh, it hasn't changed, the landscape, the buildings, nothing's changed. And then, yeah, like, oh, we've just literally got another mini Gloriavale in India. There were definitely people that weren't happy about us being there. And there was one woman who would not even talk to me. No. And I tried a few times, and she just, she had that same very disdainful, I don't know how to describe it without sounding mean either, but she didn't want a bar of me. But the kids just loved us. And the scene with Theo with her niece, and that's one scene, and it was, you can see, everybody in New Zealand can see what that means. I had earlier in the day, I had another wee child who was about 18 months old, and she was the same to me, and I'm not related. And she was just clinging to me and did not want to let me go. The kids just loved us. And when we said that we would like to come back the next day and could we do something like cook lunch, the kids were all like, yes, straight away, come back. And so that was lovely and heartbreaking. But when I first saw Faithful too, he was surprised. But I think they enjoyed the fact that somebody cared about them. That was a little bit of what I got, is that they actually felt really lonely. And here was two people that they knew that they'd grown up with, that they hadn't seen for 14 years. And we were here, and we were there because we cared about them. And they might not understand that yet, but hopefully in time they will.
That scene with the child on Theo's resting on the shoulder, that is firmly imprinted in my mind, but it must be in the rest of New Zealand because so many people have brought that scene up to me. Natalie, how do you decide when to just hold the camera on a scene like that and linger?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're sitting there looking at it in the edit suite, so you're feeling the same feelings that that the rest of New Zealand's going to feel. And every time I looked at that little girl's face, it broke my heart. And unfortunately, I think we needed to break a few hearts to get the sort of severity of the situation across. And it's about those children.
You did break hearts, and this movie was a conversation starter, wasn't it? Yeah, where do you think you want these conversations to go, Rosie? Where do these conversations need to go? Obviously, there's work now being done with India, but the whole wide story.
I think it needs to go worldwide. But obviously, initially in New Zealand, the government really needs to look at this and see for real what they have let go under their nose untouched for 50 years. And I've grown up in that. And I was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 when Hopeful went to prison, when they came and did the police raid, when there could have been change. And, you know, that's still going. And what they've let carry on without putting things in place, they let hopeful back in. That was a complete failure on their part. They've got to start taking responsibility for something that they've let go in their own country. And this is across multiple, you know, governments, not just one. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So it's encouraging. So really it's a conversation starter to say you can be courageous because we can't have more children come through this kind of culture. And we're not just talking about an over-sexualized culture. And I think Gloriavale's response to this kind of thing is, this stuff's historical. At least they're now admitting some of it happened. But the problem is the same leaders that were leading back then are still currently leading now, and they haven't yet acknowledged the horror of some of this historical. And we know it's not all just historical because the police have been working very hard. And then you look at India, it's current. This is a current unfolding, current attitudes that are still concerning, that you should live in suffering and neglect, and the Lord's coming back soon and it'll end soon, and this is just my cross and I just have to bear it. What did it do when you read the newspaper, Rosie? And the response from Gloriavale to India was along the lines of, well, we're in regular contact with the Indian community, and none of these complaints have ever, you know, like come to our ears. They say that they were they'd freely chosen to go there of their own free will, to marry, and you just read those comments and go, you don't get it yet.
No. And because we know what psychological control is, we can see it for what it is, whereas they're just looking at it as, you know, what's your big problem? These people chose to go there. And they believe that God has sent them there. So I think we are the enemies now for bringing it to light, because we're against God and what God has sent these people to do in their minds. And their comments are really flippant, which just makes me angry. It just is this, they're fine. You know, we all know that is not how it is. We know that these girls chose to go because it was their last resort. They chose that because they thought it was getting them out of a worse situation. And it's done the opposite.
Yes.
And so that breaks my heart, and it just is a repeat. We don't value people's lives. They can suffer. And those comments that, oh, yes, we're suffering, but the Lord will come back soon. To me, that is showing the desperation of, I can't wait for my life to be over. And that's what I lived through. And for these girls, it's worse. And I just can't sit around and do nothing and live my life when these girls are my friends. I grew up with them. And my family is still there. Yeah.
Rosanna, you're so, you give of yourself, and I know there's a cost. I know there's a cost to you. I know that I heard the penny was dropping inside Gloriavale, and that brings tears to my eyes. Yes, we need government agencies, we need intervention, but what is more powerful than someone who's living in it to have the padlock just, you know, unlocked a wee bit? Yes, there's still some more, you know, there are layers of things to do before someone can mentally be free, but just having a key.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And I think that key in a lot of cases, and in most cases, is actually the same key that's been used to lock them up, and that is the Bible.
Nice.
The Bible's been misused to lock them up, and they need to see that very key is their key to freedom. Yeah,
that's powerful. That's that whole concept of, it is an unhealthy community. You can be healed through going to a healthy community. And so if you've had the scriptures used in an abusive fashion, having them used to build you up is actually a very powerful healing tool, isn't it? Yeah, and I hope from people watching this that they can recognise, the heart and the motivation of people. Leavers are not going quiet. In the past, Rosie, there've been different docos and programs, and there's been a build up and a die down. Did you sense something different about this?
I do, and I hope that the noise carries on. It's time that people listen, and I think they have. Yeah.
Natalie, what does it do for you to hear, feedback and?
Oh, it's overwhelming. I've never had this kind of feedback about anything I've ever made before. I mean, it really has struck a chord, and that's really validating and heartwarming, and that's always what it was all about for us. Not about the accolades, but to actually try and create some change or be part of creating some change. Like we keep talking about the Gloriavale. Potentially it's going to be a death by 1,000 cuts, and I think absolutely, and I hope that Escaping Utopia is a part of that.
Because when you talk about death by 1,000 cuts, you're talking about the death of a system which oppresses people, aren't you? And that does need to go. Who knows what it ends up looking like physically? They're difficult conversations, aren't they, Rosie?
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult because of the belief system, and it's not just a practical community. It's a fully entwined physical, spiritual community, and it's not something that you can just go and change overnight, especially not when it's had 50 years of building it to what it is now. Yeah, so very complex. And
what makes it worth it to commit to 18 months of working with a documentary crew and pouring out your heart?
I thought at the time that if people listened and understood the plight of Gloriavale people, that would make it worth it. But I got a phone call the other day from a woman who has been in a very tricky situation, and it resonated with her to the point where it helped her make a decision. And that was when I knew that if she was the only person I affected, that it had been worth it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Oh, are we all a bit weepy? Yeah, this is incredible. Well, Natalie, I just want to say a huge thank you to your crew. They were incredible to work with. You worked carefully, very carefully, and slowly, and built trust. And what now? Like,
this is I mean, every single person who was involved in this has been affected deeply. Rosie and Elijah are going to come and stay with me in a month's time, and I can't wait. That these people are my friends now. I care deeply about them. So yeah, I mean, career aside, I just I'm honoured to have the privilege of meeting all of you, and that you trusted me to tell your stories. Yeah.
Rosie, any words for Natalie?
Yeah, Natalie has been more than a friend, and she'll be a lifelong friend if she'll keep me. And the crew, I'll never forget them. They have just been the most amazing people to work with throughout this very sensitive project, and it's something that I hold dear to my heart for my whole life. Yeah. So thank you. So much.
That's so beautiful. I want to add a nice little anecdote. Rosie and I
know what it is.
in Singapore airport, we're very jet lagged. We're on the way home, and we go on a weird little shopping spree in Singapore airport and buy matching tracksuits, and then Jake, the beautiful cameraman, he had got an upgrade to business class on the way home, and I had got an upgrade as well, and he gave his to Rosie. So Rosie and I flew back business class and drank a glass of champagne on the way home, and that's a beautiful memory that I will treasure forever.
Yes.
So yes, there were definitely light moments
Yeah.
in filming. It wasn't bleak, was it, Rosie?
No, and at the start of this, I was like, I'm going to mention Jacob's seat gift to me, and he would not let me turn it down. There was no way he wasn't going to let me take it. And so yeah, in our wee matching tracksuits, Natalie and I travelled in business class.
I love that. I love it. And look, it's good to have a laugh because the reality is there were some wonderful, wonderful moments of hilarity and laughter with your camera crew. And you know, if you can't laugh, there's something wrong. You know, yes, there are desperately sad moments. And of course, this was a sad 3-part series. Let's be honest. This was not a rom-com. You know, this was hard-hitting for a reason and for a purpose. And we're not going to deny that people have some lovely days, you know, smelling the clear air in the Holpuri Valley. This wasn't about that. This was about people's stories. People have been deeply impacted. And so please pass on our thanks to the crew, to the funders, to all those who participated, opened their homes and their life.
Everybody was so receptive and encouraging and open and honest, and we met so many amazing people that I wish we could have told their stories too.
Well, that is a good way to end this episode of Culture. And I want to thank you so much for coming along, sharing of your heart again, and just having that glimpse of the production aspects and all those things around the creation of a film. People often don't think about that long process of planning and execution. So thank you for the heart you put into it. We're, you know, so grateful. And I guess for our listeners, thank you for listening in. There will actually be another episode you can listen to in response to the Gloriavale documentary. And Natalie and Anka Richter and Kaz, our other podcast co-hosts, they're going to be having a discussion that will be airing after this episode. And they're going to be looking at the similarities between the Centrepoint and Gloriavale story, the filming, because both of these, Natalie, you were involved in both of those productions. So that will be a very interesting comparative discussion. So thanks to our listeners again. Don't forget to watch us on YouTube, leave comment, and please share us around your social media platforms as well. We know we've got a growing audience. We know there's a growing group of professionals in New Zealand who are listening to be educated so they can do a better job in the future with cult survivors. And that's one of the motivations for this podcast. So thanks for listening in today. See you all later.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If anything in today's episode was difficult or upsetting for you and you would like to talk to somebody, we encourage our New Zealand listeners to free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or you might like to visit the resources section of the Olive Leaf Network website, where you can find a range of organisations and resources that might be able to support you. We would also like to remind you that the views and thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this program are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily endorse or share them.